Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khairan, everyone, for tuning in for another episode of History Nights. Apologies for the technical issues. It wouldn't be an Islamic event without technical issues at the start. I wanted to introduce History Nights very, very briefly before we run into the talk that we have. And this is a collaboration between Islamic Relief and Ilm Feed. And the reason why they've come together is because these first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah are unlike the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah that we've had for many a century, to be honest, where the majority of the Muslim world is unable to physically go on Hajj. And because of the pandemic, because we're unable to physically go on Hajj, it's actually a chance for us to reflect on the spiritual and historical meaning behind Hajj. What are the lessons that we can learn from it? And we're using history as a tool to do that. As usual, these two organizations, mashallah, are doing great work for the Muslim community. So if you have an opportunity, please do hit that subscribe button or the like or notification button, whatever applies. And what that enables the organizations to do is to reach out to more people and to get their excellent work out to more people. The more people that they can reach, the more people they can benefit. Excuse me. So, without further ado, today's topic is going to be about the Hajj of Mansa Musa, all the money in the world, and I'll begin. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salam wa ashrafil anbiya wa mursalin nabiyana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam wa ilayhi tasliman jami'an kathira. Just like we had some technical issues today, there was a king who ruled over an empire in West Africa, whose name was Abu Bakr Keita. Abu Bakr Keita was a powerful king, but he had an idea. And that idea that kind of just stuck in his mind and it wouldn't get out was, I think that there is a land beyond the Atlantic Ocean. So remember, he's in West Africa and they can see directly onto the Atlantic Ocean. And he says, I believe that there is a land. I want to discover this land beyond the Atlantic Ocean. So as a king, he did something very different to most other kings, because most of the kings, when they send people out to explore, they send an explorer, they spend an adventurer, an Indiana Jones type figure, go out there and explore and come back to me with the riches and gold. But Abu Bakr wasn't like the other kings. This was a personal vendetta for him. He wanted to find out. It was a fad. It was a burning passion. So he wanted to go himself. So Abu Bakr himself loaded up his ship and 200 other ships, because he was the king, and they went out in search of this new land. And they never came back. He was gone. No one ever knew what happened to this huge armada of Muslim sailors. Did they ever find America? Did they not? Did they sink? Were they caught by pirates? Nobody knows. He had left in charge a young relative named Musa. And after a suitable period of time, when it was clear that Abu Bakr is not coming back, Musa became the new king. And he went from being Musa Keita to Mansa Musa, the 10th Mansa, the 10th king of his family. Mansa Musa was a religious person. He was very devout in himself as an individual. And he had a passion. He had also something that drove him. Maybe it was something that ran in the family, but it was much more normal than Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr wanted to discover a newfound land. Mansa's passion was to leave a legacy, was to gain respect in his own life, and to leave a legacy afterwards, to be known. So he did what every other king does, because this is something that everyone wants to do. Everyone wants to leave a legacy. Everyone wants people to remember them after they go. They want to remember them as having done something great. And when kings want to do this, what do? You start a war, right? When you're a king, you start a war. You start growing your empire. So that's what he did. He started wars and battles, and he started fighting those people who were around him, and he grew his empire. And because his own nation was very militarily strong, very powerful, very organized, and because Mansa Musa was uncommonly a very organized, efficient leader, the others didn't stand a chance. Within a few years, he had multiplied the size of his empire many times over. In fact, his empire was so big that it was the second largest empire in the world at that point. There was the only empire that was larger than Mansa Musa's empire was the empire of the Mongols themselves, the Mongol Empire. And even their empire wasn't ruled by one person. Their empire was ruled by different ilkhans. Right? It wasn't ruled by just like after Genghis Khan, it split up already. The empire split into multiple khanates. That's what happened at that time as well. But Mansa Musa ruled his entire empire. It was said to go from one end of the empire to the other. It took 1 year. 1 year of traveling to get from one end of the empire to the other. Or to put it in terms that we would find it easier to know, from one end of the empire to the other was bigger than the distance from New York to New Mexico. So it was almost 2/3 the size of the United States is today. And that was in his own lifetime he did that. So now he had built this huge empire. Now will he get the respect that he deserves? Now will people treat him as the king that he is? Now will he have a legacy? No. He realized that they still didn't respect him. He still wasn't seen as one of the most powerful kings and emperors in the world. How could he gain this, the respect that he so wanted? He realized what he could do. He decided that he would go on Hajj. But he wouldn't just go on Hajj. He would go on Hajj and he would distribute wealth to a level that has never been seen before. And almost everyone who's watching today will know about this. There are loads of videos that have been made about Mansa Musa, the richest man who ever lived, Mansa Musa and his expensive Hajj. So let me tell you about his Hajj. Mansa Musa was one of the world's richest people at the time, but he wouldn't know it because people didn't care. People didn't realize that. Where was this empire? West Africa? Where is that? It's off the beaten track, right? So he needed to put himself and his empire on the map. He needed to show people. And if you wanted to show people, if you wanted to get people to know what was going on, there wasn't a social media to go on. There wasn't a Facebook or a Twitter that you could go like the rappers of today, that you could just go, look at my bling, look at my gold-plated Ferrari or whatever it is. You couldn't do that. How could you show off? You could build a whole palace made of gold, but if no one saw it, how would you show off? If you went on Hajj, then the majority of the Muslim world would find out. So he went on Hajj. And now I'm not saying that Mansa Musa did Hajj to show off. I'm not saying that because we don't know what his intentions were. But we know he wanted to get respect. We know he wanted to leave a legacy. And we know he was one of the richest people who ever lived. To give you an idea of how rich he is, Time magazine actually tried to calculate how rich he was comparatively to today's wealth. And after they reached 7 times the wealth of Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos, they just gave up and they said, you can't actually physically calculate how rich this person was. There's no comparable estimate because no human being that we have alive today could still compare to how rich he was. So what can you do? Half the world's gold was in his hands. So he went on this Hajj. And on this Hajj, he didn't go by himself. He wasn't the first Mansa to go on Hajj. There were other Mansas who had been on Hajj before him. And this is a really important thing to remember. The majority of Muslim rulers have never been on Hajj. The absolute majority. In fact, it was a thing that the fuqaha, the scholars of Islam used to say that the leaders of the Muslim world should not go on Hajj because Hajj was dangerous, Hajj was difficult, and if you went, it would lead to instability in your country. So they said the leaders should not go on Hajj. But the Mansas, the West African Muslim rulers and kings, they went on Hajj. Multiple of them went on Hajj, and Mansa Musa was one of them. So when he went on this Hajj, he went all out. He had, at least from what we know, he had 60,000 people in his entourage. 60,000 people. In other times, a few hundred years ago, that was a total number of people who went on Hajj. And this was a number of people who not went with him from his country. This was his personal entourage, 60,000 people. And each of them, they say, were carrying staffs of gold. And he had 12,000 slaves, each slave carrying 2 kilos of gold, like pure gold bricks. And he had hundreds of camels, and each camel was carrying 130 kilograms of gold. And each person was decked out in brocades of clothing, which were the most expensive clothing. I mean, this was not a Hajj. This was a shimmering golden city on the move. And it was said that the journey that he took was 4,000 miles. 4,000 miles. It's a huge journey. It would take many months. And it was said that every single Friday, where would they pray? Where would the 60,000 people pray? Which mosque had spare space for 60,000 people to turn up every Friday? So what would he do? Every single Friday, he would build a new masjid. Every Friday. That's how rich this person was. And he would distribute his wealth. When people see someone that's this wealthy, we just think this is the 1%. We hate them, blah, 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 blah. He was just giving his wealth away on any excuse. He would buy souvenirs and just drop gold bricks. He would buy bread and food and just give gold away like it was nothing. He was giving gold away like it was nothing. And it was depressing the value of gold. When he got to Cairo, he spent so much money that people didn't even know what to do with the gold. For 10 to 12 years afterwards, the price of gold had dropped. That's how much gold Mansa Musa was giving out. And yet, even though he had this most magnificent Hajj, and this Hajj, which it wasn't heard about just all across the Muslim world. He had succeeded. He had put his country on the map. Suddenly everyone was like, wow, this place is amazing. Where is it again? Where is the Mali Empire? Can you tell me where Timbuktu is? Where is the Songhai Empire? Everyone wants to know. Even the non-Muslims knew. The most famous picture that we have of Mansa Musa is from a Catalan Christian mapmaker, chronicler, who drew the map of the world, and in Africa drew Mansa Musa. El Dorado, Shangri-La, all this mythical city of gold is based on what? Is based on Timbuktu. Is based on Mansa Musa's myth. People knew that there was this city of gold, this land of gold that was somewhere deep in the forest, and it even made the West try to go and discover more of Africa, because they were just like, we want to find where all this gold is. And in fact, the gold in the British crown jewels comes from 2 places. India, the jewels come from India, and the gold comes from Africa. So he succeeded in getting people to know where his country was. But then he actually went on Hajj. So this is where the story finishes. All the YouTube videos, all the articles you've ever read about Mansa Musa, they usually finish here. Rich guy went on Hajj. But the story doesn't finish here for Muslims. No. He went on Hajj, and something happened. When he was on Hajj, we don't know exactly how or when, because it isn't chronicled, but when he went on Hajj, he realized that the respect and the respect that he wanted and the legacy he wanted to leave behind was not in the power of expanding his empire, was not in the wealth that he had left behind. It was in what? It was in faith. It was in the knowledge of Islam. And when he came back, He distributed his gold, but when he came back, he brought back with him something very valuable. He started bringing back with him scholars, architects, judges, teachers, because he was like, this is what we need. We don't need the gold. We don't need the buildings. We need the knowledge. We need the faith. So he brought these people back. He started bringing more and more and more of them back. And when he came back to his people, he transformed that part of Africa. Yes, there was activity before, but what he did led to a complete transformation. Have you ever wondered, my brothers and sisters? You know, the North Africa is Muslim, and that's where the Arab and the Berber tribes were. But Southern Africa, Central Africa, a lot of it is not Muslim, right? Because the Muslims had developed a very terrible, and you could say racist relationship with the Africans who were in Southern Africa, Central Africa, where they were using them as slaves, or they were seeing them as pagans. So the dawah effort was nowhere near what it could have been. So therefore, Ethiopia, you can see that's still a Christian country. You can still see Central Africa were paganistic, animalistic, and then they were converted to Christianity. But West Africa is very different. West Africa is like a fortress of Islam. So despite the fact that the Maghrebis, the Moroccans, didn't treat them, the Muslims in the Moroccan didn't treat the African people very well, but you see Senegal, Niger, Nigeria, Mali, Malawi, you see all, not Malawi, Mali, Guinea-Bissau, Cote d'Ivoire, all these places, very Muslim heavy. So what changed? What was different about this West Africa compared to Central and East Africa? What was different is that Mansa Musa, amongst other things, Mansa Musa came back and he brought with him this knowledge, this desire to learn, this desire to teach. And he built masjids. He didn't just build masjids. He could have built a masjid, a copycat masjid like we do in the West. We literally copy the masjids from the East. He built African masjids. He goes, no, they need to be authentically African. This is going to be an African-looking Islam. This is not going to be a cut and paste job from the Middle East or from Turkey or wherever. This is going to be an African-looking mosques, like the Great Mosque of Jen, like the great mosques of Timbuktu. He didn't just build masjids. He built madrasas. He built so many madrasas. He built such a wealth of learning that if you read about it, it is absolutely amazing. It was the right of every single person in his empire, whether rich or poor, orphaned or not. You might not have food in your belly, but you have the right to a world-class education. That's what they believed. Timbuktu was on the road for Hajj. So what happened? What happens when you have any town that's on the road to Hajj? You get people flocking there trying to sell you things, right? Even now when you go to Mecca, people trying to sell you things all the time. Buy this gold, buy this, buy that, buy food. What did the people of Mali, what were they doing in his empire? They would go there and try to get books. They started libraries, and they built libraries, personal libraries and public libraries that were so big that the public library in the capital of his empire was the biggest library that the African world had ever seen since the time of the Great Library of Alexandria. And in fact, their love of learning and knowledge was so great that if you are a visitor, even a non-Muslim, it doesn't matter. If you visited their town, they said, if you visit our town, the way we're going to show you hospitality is we're going to give you scholarship, a free scholarship to learn at our university. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that someone turned up in London or in Washington, D.C. or New York, and they said, as a thank you for visiting us, please come and study at Oxford or Harvard or anything like that? Never. But that's what they used to do. Not only that, he built one of his madrasas was the Sankore Madrasa. This was a university. It's one of the world's first earliest universities. That university had 25 25,000 students. 25,000 living students there. To give you an idea, Harvard, Oxford, Cambridge today have 20,000 students. And that had 25,000. Not only that, they didn't just teach Islam, they taught maths, history, sciences, but they had a rule. Everything that you teach and every thesis that you write has to be in accordance with the Quran and Sunnah. If it isn't, it will immediately be failed. So, deen and dunya. This is what he was teaching. This is the empire that Mansa Musa built. My brothers and sisters, you know, this is not something that I'm bringing up just to show off. I'm bringing this up because this is a lesson about what the true wealth is. This is a lesson about what is true wealth, that we need to learn this, right? He learned this lesson through his life. And this is a lesson we need to learn. We might not be emperors, we might not be kings, but what do? We chase power and money. This is what we chase. We work hard for our jobs so we can earn money, so we can buy the nice car and live in the nice houses, and that we can, you know, get married in the right family, or and have a big wedding ceremony. We work hard, and there's nothing wrong with working hard, but we make the mistake in thinking that's our legacy. That was a mistake that Mansa Musa made with the Hajj. Brothers and sisters, then we make the mistake of what? Of thinking power. If I get this position in the masjid committee, if I become this position in this organization, if I rise up my career ladder and get this position, power, if I gain power and influence, right? Especially nowadays, what's the influence and power that people want? Social media influence and power, right? We all want, we're human beings, and it's addictive. We need those extra likes, we need those extra followers. And if you immediately respect someone who's got 25,000 followers, 10 times more than someone who's got 2,500 followers, even though that person who's got 2,500 may be 10 times the person who's got the person who has 25,000. So he chased power as well. He doubled the size of his empire. He had the second biggest empire in the world. You might have the second biggest Facebook account in the world. So what? Is that your legacy? Is that your true wealth? No. This is why read every non-Muslim's article or video about Mansa Musa, and it's all about the wealth. It's all about the gold. It's all about the money. And as Muslims, what we realize is the real legacy of Mansa Musa, the real wealth of Mansa Musa changed when he went on Hajj. And at the Hajj, he must have realized that all that glitters isn't gold, and all that is valuable in this world is not power, but it is knowledge and faith. I finish with this, my brothers and sisters. Please, ask yourself, what are you leaving behind as your legacy? When you go, when you die, what are people going to remember of you? What knowledge have you passed on? What have you added to the world, and especially to the Muslim Ummah, which is on its knees? What have you given it? What is your wealth? What will be your legacy? What will people make YouTube videos about for you? Because trust me, no one's going to make a YouTube video about your bank account or your car or what position you were in whatever job. No one. But if you hold on to knowledge and faith, that might be something that will live well past you die. I'll finish with the last point. After Mansa Musa died, his empire cracked, it split apart, and it fell apart, and it was destroyed. His palaces were gone, the wealth was gone, the gold was gone, it's all gone. But what remains today? The masjid and the university, the madrasa of Mansa Musa, the Sankore University, madrasa, and the masjids he built, they still survive. Let that be a lesson to all of us, inshallah, of the Hajj of Mansa Musa. Wa jazakumullah khairan. Inshallah, I will finish over here. if there are any questions, I'm not really sure where I can read them, so please forgive me. You can put them up on the wherever you're watching this. But I want to thank once again the brothers and sisters in Islamic Relief and Feed. From the Islamic Relief side, these are the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah. Please give your qurbani. There are a lot of people who are suffering across the world who are in need of your qurbani. Please donate your qurbani, inshallah. Go on their website, whichever country you're watching from, and donate. They make sure, you know, something they're very, I don't know why they're shy about saying this. I will say it because I don't work for them. You know, their qurbani costs more. I used to wonder, why does the Islamic Relief qurbani cost a little bit more than qurbani of others? And they cost more because they get the meat of the animals, which are the best animals that they would eat themselves. So it's not a sick animal, it's not an unhealthy animal or an old animal. It's the healthy, big animal. So they pay top dollar for it because they believe that the poor deserve that. And we should help, inshallah, any way you can. Please donate. And Feed, the brothers and sisters over there, they work overtime, mashallah, to get out good news stories. You know, I have a tendency to look at the negative side of things, and they're relentlessly positive, and we need that relentless positivity, inshallah, shared across the ummah. So please support them by telling your friends about them and liking or subscribing to their channels. وجزاكم خيرا سبحان الله وبحمدك نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان في خسر إلا الذين آمنوا والصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر وجزاكم الله خيرا.